Hello students, welcome to today's class. Today we are going to discuss a very important topic related to the history of ancient Greece. We will be talking about the subsistence strategies, and in that we will be looking at the non-agrarian aspects, and crafts have played a very important role in the non-agrarian economy of ancient Greece. There are certain objectives, for example, to trace the origin and evolution of traditional crafts of ancient Greece is one of the very important objectives to study today. We will be also talking about the role of craftsmen and their various crafts and the role of crafts in socio-economic processes which were prevalent in ancient Greece. The ancient populations in Greek cities and hinterland traditionally relied heavily on agriculture, fishing, small scale manufacturing units and even trade. During the 5th century BCE, however, many Athenians prioritized craft production over agrarian pursuits as a means of subsistence. Greeks valued craftsmanship so much so that even they worshipped the god of the craftsmen, whose name was Hephaestus, who was one of their greatest deities. He was considered in charge of manufacturing weapons like the fabled armor worn by Achilles of Zeus' thunderbolts and everyday items like tripods and statues. In addition to Hephaestus, the goddess Athena was also considered the protector of artisans. She was wise and skilled in making ceramics, weaving and woodworking. On the surface of a black pot, Athena, which is a red colored figurine, is pictured finishing the clay moulding of a big horse while woodworking tools dangle nearby. This belongs to the 5th century BCE and is presently housed in the National Museum of Berlin. The polis or city-state and its residents benefited from the emergence of a new class of trained craftsmen who practiced specialized crafts. Not all occupations were accorded equal respect and not all employees were seen as deserving to be free citizens. Manual labor was regarded as something only slaves and metics, which are resident immigrants without citizenship, they performed. Only occupations such as medicine, rhetoric, sculpture, painting and teaching were deemed fit for free citizens. It was unimaginable at Sparta for freedom citizens to work and be reimbursed for their labor. However, this was not the case everywhere. For instance, artisans and manual laborers in Corinth were valued and honored. The Republic of Plato is an essential source of knowledge regarding the crafts and professions that arose inside an organized city. In the Republic, Socrates and Adimantos address a large number of the crafts and occupations required to operate civic machinery effectively. Pericles was the head of the Democratic Party in Athens during the 5th century BCE, lists all the crafts and professions required for the construction and adornment of the Acropolis mentioned in an excerpt from Plutarch's Pericles. Now, let us look at the origin and importance of the craft production in ancient Greece. Gordon Childe was the first archaeologist to offer a general conceptualization for the beginning of craft production based on the growth of bronze metallurgy in ancient Mesopotamia during the 4th millennium BCE. Childe suggested that the start of full-time craft specialization resulted from aristocratic patronage in institutional contexts, as being aware that cuneiform inscriptions mentioned the production of bronze artifacts. He argued that only institutions would have the means to acquire the basic materials, advance the technology and provide artisans with the support that needed to create bronze artifacts. Childe connected the rise of metropolises or centers of production and consumption, and the spread of artisanal production in general. In his view, artisan production was a crucial aspect of the early urban revolution. Child was right to link the development of early Mesopotamian civilization to bronze metallurgy because their armies relied heavily on bronze made weapons. However, his assumption that metallurgy developed in institutional settings appears to hold less ground. According to later studies, institutions reorganized manufacturing processes to suit their unique requirements rather. They were responsible for developing bronze metallurgy. According to Gilstein, independent craftspeople began making bronze in non-institutional settings as early as the middle of the 6th millennium BCE. The same was true for the large-scale textile manufacturing that took place in institutional settings, which was preceded by a lengthy history of domestic weaving. Another model for the development of craft production is linked to the appearance of prestige goods economies in ranked and pre-state societies. Through patron-client relationships with individual artisans, elites funded and regulated the creation of wealth products in accordance with this model. The objective of craft sponsorship was to expand elite access to and control over valuable products that they could use to enhance their power through extravagant displays, feasting, and gift giving. The manufactured items were also utilized to forge political alliances that transcended conventional kinship ties and laid the groundwork for establishing a nested hierarchy of political leaders. These political alliances wielded authority at the level of the community as well as the region. As predicted by Child, the demand for finished items increased as communities expanded and urban centers emerged. Throughout antiquity, manufacturing items for commerce, including spices, dyes, incense, and textiles made of cotton, silk, wool, and even linen relied significantly on domestic production. It is essential to recognize that most ancient craftsmanship occurred in non-institutional settings. There are three reasons for this. Number one, the highest aggregate demand was for utilitarian products utilized by all social classes of the population. Number second, any attempt to monopolize control over manufacturing a wide range of utilitarian items would have been unfeasible due to the transportation expenses associated with distributing them to a larger population. Number third, and most significantly, even little amounts of handiwork were lucrative for individuals and artisans because it reduced their overall sustenance risk. Crafting allowed idle labor to be employed in a secondary subsistence activity if the necessary tools and materials were available. Even small-scale craft production gave households a marginal return advantage over non-crafting households in exchange for the items produced. Now let us talk about some crafts which were prevalent in ancient Greece. Ancient societies had a deep-rooted tradition in various crafts such as leather working and pottery production. While the Greeks excelled at these abilities, they also invented a few new techniques. The Greeks devised more crafts than any other society, and around 625 BCE, Greeks in Western Asia created a new method of metal working when they began minting the coins. They could manufacture several identical coins by striking discs of heated silver or electrum, which was a combination of gold and silver, with a carved bronze stamp. Crafts were frequently interdependent and affected one another. The varied crafts prevalent in ancient Greece are a hallmark of Greek civilization. In the next paragraphs, which are about to follow, some of the most significant crafts of Greece are discussed. So, we will be talking about glass making. Glass making appears to have been one of the most significant crafts of ancient Greece. Its technology might have travelled from Egypt to Greece via Crete, as evidenced by the discovery of artifacts that date back to the 2nd millennium BCE. Beads were the first items made of glass. In approximately 1500 BCE, a variety of vessels appear. Some beautiful objects made of dark blue glass that looks like lapis lazuli were found in Mycenae. Glass workers adapted techniques employed by potters and metal workers. They used modeling molten glass around a solid glass core and pressed it into open molds to make inlays, miniature vases, jars and even bowls. The heating and fusing of prepared glass rods constituted a more sophisticated procedure. During the archaic period of Greece and the classical periods, earthenware appears to have been the preferred material for tableware. Small sand-cored vases discovered in Greece are dated to the 6th century BC, but their origin is uncertain. In the sand core technique, molten glass threads were wrapped around a formed sand core. After the glass had solidified, the sand was eliminated. Glass making did not become more prevalent until the Hellenistic period. The development of glass blowing in the 1st century BCE, likely in Syria, made glass makers' job easier. Now coming to another item, which is the basket making. The earliest preserved artifacts date to the Mesolithic period, when baskets were an efficient object of daily usage. In ancient Greece, lower class women and metics supplemented their income by weaving, plaiting or coiling to create baskets and bags, mats, rugs and even other goods. Materials include reed, cane, rush, sisal fibre and ashwood splinters. Baskets were used by market merchants, fishermen and even miners. For example, a vase from Corinth dating to the 6th century BCE depicts miners filling baskets with clay from a pit as younger slaves haul the baskets up the ropes. In addition to pottery, baskets were the most commonly used containers in antiquity to store grains, for example, as is evidenced by the abundant Egyptian evidence and cave findings from the Judean desert. In moderate climates such as Aegeans, baskets and other organic materials may only be maintained under unusual conditions. Several Bronze Age baskets were found carbonized beneath the ash of the volcanic explosion that devastated the city of Akrotiri on Thera. A little fragmented woven basket was unearthed from a tomb at Ormenoi's late Minoan cemetery. In subsequent periods, the survival of baskets is attributable to a combination of unusual circumstances such as sealed contexts and dry weather. Some late classical and Hellenistic stone sarcophagus burials in Thessaly exhibited this characteristic feature. Basketry, a craft that could be performed anywhere without specialized equipment, was likely not seen as a high status job. The worth of its goods in raw materials is small, but collecting resources and the actual weaving demand skill and specialized expertise, which would have raised their perceived value. Georgia Nakov's examination of geomorphic linkages between metalwork, basketry and pottery in ancient Aegean early Bronze Age civilization illustrated that the social environment determines the relative cultural significance of basketry as well as other crafts and its relationship to other crafts like pottery. Now, we will be talking about the weapons as a very important craft which was prevalent in ancient societies. Metal workers had a wide variety of jobs including making weapons. Many useful tools for farming, hunting and fishing were also manufactured by them. In vase paintings, a tall shaft for melting metals is shown. By hand, the air was blown into the bag while the wrought iron mass was removed from the bottom. Charcoal was also used most of the times. Iron was especially hard to work with. To get the wrought iron out of the furnace, you had to break it down first, so it could only be used once. Iron was the easiest metal for the ancient Greeks to get, so they used it to make most of their weapons. In a furnace or over a fire, the iron was melted. When it was soft enough, a tool was made by hammering it into the right shape. Most people in ancient Greece used spears as their main weapon. Its main tip was molded from iron. Soldiers held shields in front of their bodies, and these shields were made from crude animal hides or hammered metal. Ancient Greek soldiers were also good at fighting with swords, spears, which were known as javelins, slingshots, and the bow and arrow. Now, coming to another important craft work, which was the woodwork. Woodworkers proficient in sawing, joining and finishing produced various utilitarian and decorative goods, from jewelry boxes to furniture. Bowls, toys and other items were carved from wood using only a saw, a mallet, files, gauges and sandpaper in wood carving, which was a distant art form. Even religious objects were crafted from wood. Epictetus, which is a red figure cup, depicts a teenager giving the finishing touches to a wooden herm. A herm is a statue of the god Hermes, typically placed at the entrances of homes or as a road sign. A wooden Xenon, a modest statue from the island of Samos dated to the 7th century BC, is a remarkable discovery. The Xenons were objects of worship as they represented the deities. Only a handful of these frail statues remain, most of which were preserved in flooded areas where the wood was preserved. From ancient times onwards, various materials have been used in furniture production. Homer, for example, around 900 and 800 BC, depicts gold, silver and ivory inlays on Mycenaean bedsteads, chairs and even footstools. There are sites where thrones made of marble and stone are said to have been found. The sites that reveal these thrones and their remains were excavated at the palaces of Knossos in Crete and the court of Pylos. Due to the use of less lasting materials throughout the classical period, our knowledge of classical period furniture and cabinets is primarily derived from textual descriptions and artistic depictions. Carving wood on a lathe, which was a technique known as turning, was introduced in the 6th century BC and along with curving techniques enabled skilled craftsmen to create a variety of forms. The principal ones were the lismos, which was a chair, thenes, the footstool, which were used in various shapes and sizes. The thornos, which means a throne, a more elaborate high-backed chair for special occasions. The trapeza, table, which is a tiny oblong or circular table. The klin, couch used for sleeping as well as lounging during feasts. And the larnax, which is the chest for keeping clothing and bedding. Now, let us talk about one more important aspect, that is the pottery production. Ancient Greek pottery has endured for a long time, full and in fragments, because of its sturdy composition. Greek pottery and its shards are among the most valuable resources archaeologists use for studying the history of ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, pottery was painted with abstract and realistic scenes representing daily life. The paintings on jugs, vases, and pots make archaeologists assume the people's lives in ancient Greece. The Greeks manufactured ceramics that were significantly superior to those created by the preceding societies. Greek potters created vases, urns, and bowls. They were renowned for their skill. Vases with artworks such as Apollo playing a tortoiseshell lyre were the most renowned ones. Unlike Eastern pottery, which came in various forms, ancient Greek pottery consisted of a few dozen forms that altered little over time. Numerous items like grain, olive oil, and wine were stored and even transported in amphorae, which was a very big clay jar with two handles at the mouth that made them easy to carry. They averaged 2 to 3 feet in height and carried approximately 7 gallons of liquid. Their unusual shapes and markings allowed archaeologists to date them and determine their place of origin. Now, talking about the terracotta figurines from ancient Greek sites. The ancient Greeks were quite familiar with terracotta figurines, fragments, and full figurines discovered during archaeological excavations are the fundamental basis for understanding the figurine's function. Some figurines functioned as charms to fend off evil, while others merely served as house decorations or religious representations in modest house shrines. They were presented to temples and sanctuaries as offerings to the gods and placed in graves as the deceased's prized things, which are known as grave goods. They were also given as gifts or as protective devices. One group stands out among the different types of Greek terracotta sculptures. These are figures with jointed or movable limbs. Their legs, arms, and occasionally even heads were created separately and connected to the body after firing. This category of figurines was widespread across the Greek and Roman worlds at all times. Most of these figurines have suspension holes on top of their heads. When the figurines were shaken or hung, the dangling arms and legs they moved. Figurines made of terracotta with movable links are frequently referred to as dolls or children's toys and are sometimes believed to have been dressed. The frequency with which these dolls are unearthed in adult burials suggested a possible chthonic connection or apotropic purpose. Given the variety of options, it is difficult to assign a single function for articulated figures. Now we will discuss crafts and craftsmanship. Everything manufactured in the ancient world, from ships to individual nails, was manufactured by hand. This required individuals' proficiency in numerous crafts, including metalworking, stone masonry, carpentry, and textile weaving. Although some accomplished women may have existed in ancient Greece, most of those who practiced their art for a living were probably males. Craftsmen made shoes, plates, lamps, and countless other everyday products, in addition to specialized items such as dazzling diamonds. For instance, potters created tens of thousands of vases and bowls, a vital component of ancient global trade. Some artisans made statues, wreaths, and other artifacts for religious worship, while others produced the necessary weaponry for warfare. Craftsmen were so vital to militaries that the Roman legions had their own corps of skilled laborers to make everything from military boots to weapons and even armor. Now, let us discuss about the role of craft production in the socio-economic processes. Crafts were a significant component of the subsistence of primitive societies. The success of some societies was contingent on the quantity and caliber of their artisans. because Athens contained high quality marble and clay for masons and potters, as well as ample silver ore for metal workers. It became one of the busiest craft centers throughout ancient Greece. Few artisans attained individual renown, and only fewer were recorded in the historical records. In fact, some were unknown in their heydays. Still, artisans demonstrated their delight in their work by signing the gold and silver plates, ceramics, sculptures, gravestones, coins, and city walls they made. In an attack on a rival, the Greek vase painter Euthymides inscribed on one of his vessels, Ephronios never painted it this way. The ancient Greeks did not make a difference between an artist and a craftsman, but these terms are often considered different today. Regarding their jobs and social standing, artists were on the same level as cobblers and blacksmiths. But different crafts brought different amounts of money. The artisans knew each other through their professions and their social lives. No matter what, it is impossible to think that a sculptor or painter was ever a member of aristocracy or court society. In reality, princes and nobles' interests in poetry and professional poets' familiarity with the reality of war was bound to widen the gap between artists who worked with their hands and poets who worked with their minds. Because of this one-of-a-kind situation, poets in the heroic period were more respected than scribes in ancient Greece. Now we will be discussing the craftsman's life in ancient Greek society. Most craft persons were taught their crafts by their fathers. A family frequently practiced the same trade for several generations. For instance, several of the shipwrights who constructed the Athens warships were related, and Praxiteles, an Athens-born sculptor, is said to have been both the son and the uncle of two other sculptors. If a craftsman had no sons, he hired slaves or apprentices to work in his shop. Many talented people were once slaves who purchased their freedom with the cash they made through practicing their trades. Apprentices sometimes spent several years doing errands, sweeping floors and collecting water before learning the craft. Training began at a very young age. Workshops were typically very small. A furniture maker, a blacksmith, or a shoemaker shop frequently had a master and a helper. Larger workforces were needed for several other crafts. In one Athenian vase painting, 8 people are shown working in a pottery kiln, each doing a distinct duty. On a ceramic wheel, for example, a boy, an apprentice or slave is spinning. One guy is creating a sizable vase while others prepare to fire in the kiln or ceramic furnace. Another man in the scene carries a freshly manufactured vase outdoors to dry, etc. Large businesses like shipyards, mines, and quarries were frequently controlled by investors who procured slaves and employed artisans to work for them. A master craftsman must be well versed in all aspects of his craft. In his workshop, a carpenter cuts timber, seasons it, and molds it into finished products. Sculptors frequently worked on their medium of choice from beginning to end. They chose the stone at quarries, oversaw the stone masons as they chiseled the stone blocks into statues, and then placed the statues in the places of their buyers. Some craftspeople needed to be able to work with multiple materials. A jeweler might work with ivory, gold, and glass, whereas an armor manufacturer would need to employ metal and leather workers. Some crafts produced a variety of goods. For instance, some pottery kilns make expensive, unique products for wealthy customers, while others make mass produced bowls and jars for everyday use. So, from the above description of different craft items and the craftsmen which were working in the everyday lives in ancient Greece, one would say that there was enough potential in the ancient craftsmen of Greece which produced these much of crafts and they were used in the day to day lives. So, this is all what we have to understand in today's lecture. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you.